Is Keir Starmer headed for number 10 at the next general election? Well, all the opinion polls are certainly pointing in that direction. Plus, of course, we had the Salisbury and Ainslie by-election, which would also indicate that he is en route for number 10. It seems that Keir Starmer and the right-wing cabal that surround him are working to a master plan that they're convinced will take them to number 10 on a tidal wave of popular support. However, I think there's a flaw in this master plan, and that flaw will become more apparent the closer we get to that general election. But before we look at the actual flaw, the fly in the ointment, let's have a look at the master plan itself. Keir Starmer's master plan comes in two parts. Part one is very basic and very lazy. It makes an assumption, and that assumption is that everybody, or the bulk of the people who voted Labour in 2017 and 2019 will vote Labour again at the next general election. The logic here seems to be, well, my goodness, they voted Labour when scary Jeremy Corbyn was leader, so quite clearly these people will vote Labour whatever and no matter what monster is leading the party, so we can just take their votes for granted. We don't need to give them anything for the vote, we don't need to offer them anything for the vote. That is just our baseline. Those are basically the people we treat with total contempt. We just ignore them and take their vote for granted. That is part one. Then part two of this master plan is they then think the task becomes, how do we get Tory swing voters to actually swing and vote Labour at the next general election and add them to the tally of the people that we take for granted, the vote Labour come what may group. So if we just get enough Tory swing voters to swing, then victory is guaranteed. We are on the way to number 10. But then you have to stop and think, well, how do we get them to swing? How do we get these Tory swing voters to actually come out and vote for us? Well, they've got one big advantage at the moment, which is that everybody's fed up with the Tories. Even die-hard Tories are fed up with the Tories, but they still basically believe Tory voters in the same basic principles I've always believed in. So Keir Starmer obviously thinks, or is it Tony Blair or Peter Mandelson or one of these shadowy figures that's pulling Keir Starmer's strings, are obviously saying to him, well look, what we did in 1997 was that we just kind of pretended to be the Tory party, and that seemed to work, and lots of the Tory swing voters then just voted Labour. So Keir Starmer's mulled this over and he's decided to himself, yes, that seems like a good strategy, but he's going to try that strategy on steroids. It's much more blatant, it's much more obvious with Keir Starmer that he is presenting himself to Tory swing voters as simply the Tory party under a different name. So that means that these Tory swing voters, they can go to the voting booth, they can quite happily put their cross beside Labour, because wink, wink, we all know that it is actually just a Tory party but under a different name. That is the strategy, that is what he is basing everything around. But will it work? Is that enough to actually get him to where he wants to be, to get enough of these Tory voters? Because the basic calculation is that traditional Labour voters lost, and there will be some, will be less than swing Tory voters gained. So that's the core calculation, and as long as that calculation looks as though it's happening, then there will be no change from Keir Starmer. There will be no communication and actually talking to his core vote and core supporters. There will be nothing on the table for them. Everything will be geared to the Tory swing voter, because it is the Tory swing voter is the sole focus of their concern. How are they going to persuade these people that the Labour Party is actually just the Tory party? They've come up with this magical phrase, this wonderful phrase, the phrase that they think will absolutely pull the rabbit out of the hat for them. And this phrase is fiscal responsibility. Fiscal responsibility, we're hearing that term all the time from Keir Starmer and the shadow Labour front bench. Fiscal responsibility, fiscal responsibility, fiscal responsibility. So what fiscal responsibility basically means is that they are not prepared to spend any money on anything, even the things that we all know need to be done. Keir Starmer seems to think that fiscal responsibility is a magic phrase that will blind voters to a simple and obvious fact. And that fact is, in the 6th richest country in the world, we have more than enough money to do what we all know needs to be done. And that would include making sure that children in this country don't go hungry, and that we have a properly funded NHS and functioning social services. These are the things we all know need to be done. The money is there to do them. Fiscal responsibility is simply a way of saying, well, we could do these things, but really we don't want to. Why would they be doing that? What is the message there? Well, the message, fiscal responsibility is code. It's a coded message to swing Tory voters that they don't need to worry about their taxes going up. And as we know, with Tories, nothing worries them more, nothing concerns them more than the possibility of their taxes going up. So if they've got that implicit promise from Keir Starmer, that is a major, major factor in pushing them to swing at the next general election and actually vote Labour. That promise from Keir Starmer that taxes, their taxes, taxes on the rich, taxes on the wealthy, taxes on corporation, taxes on profits, that there will be no increase in taxes. So will it work? Will the fiscal responsibility, will that actually push the dial, and will it make sure that the number of Labour voters lost will always be smaller than the number of Tory voters gained? Because while that equation is working out, they have no motivation to do anything different than what they're doing. But I think there's a flaw in that argument. I think there is a problem with that way of calculating the probability of electoral success. And I think all we need to do is to look at the number of groups that Keir Starmer is alienating as he progresses with this strategy. First of all, we can look at parents. Okay, if you are a parent, why would you be voting Labour? There must be parents up and down this country who traditionally voted Labour, who are looking at what the Labour Party has said, what Keir Starmer has said, what his shadow cabinet has said, and thinking to themselves, why should they vote Labour this time round? To give a few examples, we have the 2-child benefit cap, an horrendous policy, punitive, almost eugenics in its nature, but Keir Starmer's now said that will stay, despite him and numerous other members of the shadow cabinet telling us what an horrendous policy it was. We are now being told, because of fiscal responsibility, that that policy will remain for the foreseeable future. Even The Guardian, a big supporter of Keir Starmer, seems taken aback by this decision. It tells us Labour would keep 2-child benefit cap, says Keir Starmer. Leader says party in power will stick with Tory policy seen as driving low-income families into deeper poverty. We also have the issue of childcare. Now, free childcare, it's not an extravagant aspiration to have. It's widely available in Europe and in the Scandinavian countries. It's because the benefit of it is proven. Free childcare from 9 months to 11 years, all sorts of benefit for the child psychologically in terms of mixing and socialisation, but also loads of benefits for the parents in terms of widening the type of work that they could be able to get, getting those parents back into the productive economy again, and the type of jobs they can take, because it's not necessarily always going to come down to a calculation between taking the job and then what that's going to cost in childcare. So everybody benefits, the economy benefits, society benefits, the parent benefits, the child benefits. It's a policy that makes sense, but remember, fiscal responsibility, reassuring swing Tory voters, look, this might cost a bit extra money, so don't you worry, we're not planning to do it, so don't you be worrying about your taxes. That is all it is, pure and simple. As Owen Jones correctly points out, universal childcare should be seen as a basic pillar of a civilised society. A smart Labour Party would commit to it and denounce the Tories for their war on the family. Free school meals. Again, we know that this is a perfectly doable, perfectly achievable policy aspiration. It's not going to break the bank. Labour's already doing it in Wales. The SNP are planning to introduce it up in Scotland, and Sadiq Khan is going to do it in London. So it's only kids in England, outside London. You're the ones, sorry, it's not for you, because we need to keep reassuring the Tory swing voters about our spending plans and how that will affect their taxes. Keir Starmer's attitude to Sure Start must be yet another reason why parents up and down the country are wondering why the Labour Party deserves their vote. As Owen Jones succinctly put it, Sure Start was one of the proudest legacies of New Labour. Combined with backing the Tories' policy of driving kids into poverty, this underlies Labour has no interest in supporting children. It's vandalism, damaging kids' potential, damaging our country's future. The Tories have cut it and cut it and cut it, and Keir Starmer's made it clear that that situation will just remain. Green voters will quite often lend their vote to the Labour Party because of the two-party system, because it's usually Labour versus Tory and only one of them is going to win, and for a lot of Green voters it's the lesser of two evils and they will lend their vote to the Labour Party. But there must be Green voters up and down this country thinking, well, why? Why should I? Because the Labour Party policies when it comes to green issues are as bad, if not worse, than anything the Tories are planning to do. We could start looking at for example, the Rosebank oil field. Okay, again, we had plenty of statements from the Labour front bench, including Ed Miliband, telling us how dreadful it was to be doing, or to be thinking about opening up new oil fields in the North Sea when the world around us is burning. But no, Keir Starmer's decided otherwise, and Keir Starmer's decided that the Rosebank oil field will go ahead after all. But it's even worse than that, because what he said recently was that he would not rescind any new licences for North Sea drilling that were in place before the next general election. The Tories have rushed out a whole load of licences just in the last year or two, and Keir Starmer's now committed to that. Keir Starmer will not rescind any of them. The Green Prosperity Plan was going to be £28 billion a year. Huge investment there, substantial sum of money into decarbonising the economy, a just transition in terms of jobs, in terms of replacing the jobs that were being lost in the old polluting industries, as we created new jobs in green and environmental technologies, and it was widely applauded. But of course, it might mean spending £28 billion by definition, so that has also been thrown on the scrap heap. To all intents and purposes, that is now gone. Again, recently we just need to look at the ultra low emission zones. Again, the very same thing. It's just a complete lack of principle on Keir Starmer's part, and just a mirroring and a copying of Tory policies no matter what it is. As Owen Jones puts it, if Keir Starmer gets his way and bullies Sadiq Khan into dropping ULEZ, then hundreds of people are going to die. It's really as straightforward as that. We are now at the stage of human life being treated as expendable in Starmer's mission to destroy any and every principle. It'd be very difficult if you are a Green voter thinking about lending your vote to Labour, or if you're a normal Labour voter but with a very green environmental motivation in terms of who you vote for. It's very difficult to see why or how you would justify saying, well, I'm voting Labour because they're better than the Tories, because there is no evidence at all, practical concrete evidence, that they are better than the Tories. There was pledges about student debt and dealing with the problem of student debt. That was part of Keir Starmer's now infamous 10 pledges that got him elected, the 10 blatant lies, as it should be called, where he said that he would deal with the issue of student debt. Of course, that means spending money, and that sends the wrong message to Tory swing voters. So sorry students, nothing for you either. Help with student debt is in the bin as well. Pensioners is another group. We have one of the lowest state pensions in the developed world. There are millions of pensioners who rely solely on that state pension. But now we hear that Keir Starmer is planning to take away the triple lock. So that will plunge millions of pensioners into further poverty. So again, you would have to ask pensioners, why are you thinking of voting for Labour? Because Labour certainly aren't thinking of you. Trade unionists, again, which you would imagine would be a core Labour voter constituency that Keir Starmer should be talking to, but at the National Policy Forum in Nottingham this week, there was a huge bus stop between the trade unions and Keir Starmer's front bench, because it turns out that not only is Keir Starmer not happy about actually strengthening workers' rights, he's not even planning to repeal Tory legislation that attacked workers' rights. There's not even the money argument here about swing Tory voters being concerned about tax increases. This is simply because Tories don't like trade unions, so Keir Starmer's going to make it clear that he's going to take a firm line with trade unions as well. So trade union rights, something that should be fundamental to the Labour Party, that's also in the bin. That's totally been discarded as well. If you're a non-homeowner, especially as the majority of young people are, considering what's happened to house prices, if you're trapped in the rental market, you know what a nightmare it is. You know the problems there. Part of Labour's previous pledges, when they were actually courting Labour voters, actual real Labour voters, with policies that would appeal to them rather than this obsessive focus on Tory swing voters, they did have a policy about introducing rent controls, and I think most people in the rental market would accept that rent controls are necessary. Renters are being hit harder than mortgage holders are. At least if you've got a mortgage, you know you own the property, you're going to get your money back eventually down the line. If you're a renter and you've just been hit with rent increase after rent increase after rent increase, you're going to have nothing at the end of the day to show for that. So rent controls out the window as well. So people who rent wonder, there must be renters thinking, well, why the hell should I vote Labour? So parents, students, Green voters, trade unionists, pensioners, renters, there are 6 groups, okay, that's 6 groups that really must be considering their continued support for the Labour Party. These 6 groups, their votes have been taken for granted, that Keir Starmer can just treat them whatever way he wants to and they'll still vote Labour, and at the end of the day the equation will still work out that the number of Labour voters lost will be less than the number of swing Tory voters gained. But I would argue that he's alienating so many subgroups of natural Labour voters that dial is changing, that we are reaching a tipping point where it is going to be the number of traditional Labour voters lost is going to be greater than the number of Tory swing voters gained. And it's only if Keir Starmer realises that as a risk, will he change his strategy, and will he actually have something on the table for some of the weakest and some of the most impoverished members of society, instead of everything, absolutely everything being geared to Tory swing voters with not a thought for anybody else. And it's also worth bearing in mind that when Keir Starmer talks about tough choices, hard choices, difficult choices, whichever his phrase for that day is, that these tough choices never involve standing up to the rich, to the powerful, to the corporations, to the Rupert Murdochs of this world. they always involve, his tough choices always involve sticking the boot into some of the weakest and most powerless members of our society. That's the tough choices as far as Keir Starmer is concerned. I think it's worth pointing out that when the next time you hear somebody calling Keir Starmer and his Labour Party red Tories, it is worth remembering that is not an insult. That is literally their electoral strategy.